Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 12. And as we look at that passage, let me just set this up for us this morning a bit. So first of all, imagine with me for a minute that you are low on groceries. You guys are out of eggs, out of milk, out of the things you need in your home. And so you decide to jump in your car and head to the grocery store. Okay, pretty relatable situation for all of us. This particular day is another great day in the Inland Empire. It's windy, right? It's dusty. There's all kinds of wind happening. And so you're driving to the grocery store. You park in the parking lot. And as you pull up, imagine that you see an empty parking lot except for one lone guy. He's in the parking lot, and he's apparently there to buy groceries as well. You think anyway. But then he gets out, he grabs a cart, and as he's heading to the front doors of the grocery store, you notice that he doesn't just simply push the cart in. He starts to race up and down these empty parking lot aisles, and he's turning the cart on two wheels, and he's doing extreme U-turns with the cart, and he's running up and down these lanes of the empty parking lot. And you're just kind of sitting there 1 foot out of your car, like, what is this person doing right now? Like, is this a prank thing? Is this a video being, that's probably what I would think, right, at that moment. Like, why is this guy running around like crazy with his cart? At some point, he actually just pushes the cart to the side, doesn't even use the wheels, just pushes the cart as fast and as hard as possible down these parking lot lanes. And so your curiosity gets the best of you. You're like, what are you doing, man? Like, what is going on? Why are you doing this? This seems ridiculous in so many ways. And he kind of looks back at you with like a dumb grin, and he's like, I'm trying to fill up my cart with wind. What? Well, why are you doing that? And he kind of continues on and just moves forward. And maybe as you hear me talk, you're like, this is the dumbest intro I've ever heard before, ever. That doesn't make any sense at all. Maybe that's true. But honestly, if you missed last week in Ecclesiastes 1, that's a little bit of what we've talked about so far in the book of Ecclesiastes. Last week, verses 1 through 11, we talked about how the author, Solomon, he saw this futility, this vanity in chasing after what the world offers. And there's this futility, lack of meaning. There's this busy lives. People are living their lives. They're having babies, and they're going to work, and they're dying, and going through the whole process of life. Nothing changes. In fact, Ecclesiastes talks about how the sun and the rivers and the world just keep spinning. And like the example, it's kind of this pointless exercise in trying to capture wind in a shopping cart. It's not possible. There's no really any logic to it at all. And so this morning, we're going to continue our journey with the preacher, the writer, who we believe to be Solomon. He's on this journey for this quest of joy. And he's going to approach this not maybe like the way you and I would. Maybe in some ways there's similarities, but think about Solomon in terms of having access to every resource possible. This is a wealthy guy. He had access to anything. So think about like LeBron James or Elon Musk or Warren Buffett. These ultra rich, access to all. If you wanted to have a nice meal, he was having the best meal possible. If you wanted to have entertainment, it was the best entertainment possible. And so I think while financially maybe we don't have access to those things, we can all relate to the sense of wanting to be satisfied and wanting to chase and wanting to fill our hearts with things that satisfy us. And after a while, we realize over and over again that something is broken in our world, something is missing as we chase the things that we're after. And it reminds me of this John Mayer quote. He's a singer-songwriter. The song, Something's Missing. He said, something's missing, and I don't know how to fix it. Something's missing, and I don't know what it is. Friends, check. Money, check. A night well slept, check. Opposite sex, check. Guitar, check. Microphone, check. Messages waiting on me when I come home, check. And it's this universal experience of like we try and fill our hearts and our hands with so many things that we hope will satisfy us. And as Blaise Pascal also writes, all men seek happiness. This is without exception. Whatever different means they use, they all tend to this end. the cause of some going to war and others avoiding it is the same desire in both to be happy. This is the motive of every action of every man, even those who hang themselves. A search for happiness, a search to be desired. And so this is the question I want to start with us this morning. What will make you truly happy? In your life, what will satisfy you, actually, in your days? We are all on this journey for satisfaction, and we need something bigger. And we all go looking for things, but it all ultimately leads to disappointment. I love that this morning our catechism had to do with idolatry. That's really kind of the idea that we're looking at. Like these things that serve as great delights and enjoyments, but when they come to holding the place that God only should hold, they're terrible gods. Idols never satisfy. And so there's three things that we're going to look at this morning as we look at Ecclesiastes. Three things that the world chases, that the world would say, these things are it. And we know from our experience and also from Solomon's experience that they actually don't satisfy at all. So we have a big chunk to look at, and let me just kind of put you at ease here a little bit. There's really, if you look at this passage, there's three portions that we're going to point out, and I believe they all go together pretty well here. So the first thing that we chase is wisdom. Chasing wisdom. Look at verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after the wind. So first thing I want you guys to understand, look at verse 13. If you have your Bibles, if you have a highlighter, he says, I applied my heart. I applied my heart. I wanted to encourage you, don't put Solomon in this box as we start this study, as we look at what he chases in his life. It's easy for us to maybe say, well, he's living a hedonistic lifestyle. He's just simply seeking pleasure. He's out for himself completely. That's not the case. We see in verse 13, it's a sincere quest for satisfaction. He's put his whole heart into it. He's pursuing earnestly. And so it's easy to typecast Solomon as somebody who's just doing his own life on his own terms. He's not Frank Sinatra, right? I did it my way kind of thing. He's looking high and low. And what he's found is an unhappy business. Solomon is a journeyman, and he truly wants to understand. He wants to understand what makes the heart tick. And he concludes that it's all vanity. The word there is hevel. It means like a vapor. It's here today and gone tomorrow. And it's all vanity. So Solomon tackles the first thing of wisdom. And what I love about this is that as we talk about wisdom, he talks about it because oftentimes this is where the world and their best thinkers and their best philosophers, they land as wisdom is something that we can put our hope in. Wisdom is something we can hang our hats on. It's worthwhile. Wisdom, everything else, sure, like pleasures of life and material things, but wisdom is oftentimes the best that secular philosophers have to point to. Like, let's pursue wisdom together. And so Socrates and Plato and these guys, and what Solomon points out is he says the world's highest virtue, the best that they have to offer, it still won't satisfy. It's still not enough. My dad was an immigrant, and he came from Indonesia and then Holland and came to America, kind of had the whole immigrant story, Ellis Island, the whole deal. And as I grew up, I was adopted, so there's some layers there, I understand. I was adopted from Korea, but I had an immigrant dad, so it's kind of like the same but different. And what's interesting is he instilled this work ethic in me as an immigrant, and as I grew up, education was like, it was super important to him that I went to school, that I went to college, that I was thoughtful about those things. Because he, in his mind, in his mindset, his family culture, like wisdom and acquiring knowledge was the highest opportunity, the best thing you could do in life. And I think that was well-meaning. And so I think it's important that we do finish school. And if you have multiple degrees, or if you yourself, kids, children, students, if you're in school today, finish school. Those are good things. But remember, it's not the purpose of your being on earth. It's not the whole, it's not the end. It's good, but information of the mind does not equate to fulfillment of the soul. And so if we chase information, if we chase and saying, hey, I want to be wise, I want to know more than everybody else, it doesn't guarantee that you will be fulfilled personally. In fact, if I had everybody in this room, it'd be hard in this room, but if I had everybody line up from how much education you had, right? Like, didn't graduate high school all the way to like PhD or whatever, and had you all line up in order, it wouldn't correlate necessarily with how happy you are. Right? Because we all have different experiences in life. There's heartache, there's disappointment, there's things that we have to deal with. And so Solomon points out, he's like, look, when it comes to wisdom, it's an unhappy business. This pursuit, it's not fulfilling. And so he says this proverb in verse 15. He says, what is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. And he says this because, look, if you ever thought about something that's broken, there's no fixing it, right? If something's missing, it doesn't count up. How many of you guys have ever opened up a puzzle for the first time and you start doing that puzzle and you get to the end and you're like, I feel like this isn't right? Like there's something that's missing here. And sure enough, there's one piece missing, right? Your dog probably ate it, or your kids probably, whatever, right? There's frustration there. And Solomon says, look, if it's broken, it's broken. If there's something that's missing from the bag, it won't add up. And he's describing the world of wisdom. He says, I've been there, done that, and it's permanently bent. It's permanently messed up. It won't fulfill. I realize that we would love to fix our friends and our family, and oftentimes we try and offer wisdom and offer advice. There's sometimes things that just can't be fixed with our words. As Solomon gets to the end and he realizes it's like, it's not enough just to be smart. Like Solomon was the wisest person who ever lived. That's what the Bible tells us. And he said, even me, there's an end to my wisdom. There's still brokenness, there's still cancer, there's still disability, there's still hardship that people experience. Something permanent is broken. Verse 16, he said, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had a great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my heart. Again, Solomon is all in. He's trying to be sincere about his pursuit of wisdom. I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving in the wind. Striving in the wind. This is one of Solomon's favorite phrases. And he says in verse 18, for much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrows. And so listen, don't skip out on school. Don't stop reading books. Don't run from wisdom. That's not the point. But don't put your hope in it either. Right? The world's wisdom fails consistently. And especially when you compare it to the wisdom that we find in the cross of Jesus Christ. You know there's wisdom in the cross? The world sees it as folly, but the work of Jesus on the cross is wisdom. It shows up in that it's God's perfect plan for us. And in that plan is heavenly, is spiritual wisdom. And so if we're going to put our hope in wisdom anywhere, let's put our hope in wisdom of the cross and God's plan to save. So that's the first thing, chasing wisdom. Number 2, chasing pleasure. This is the section that takes up the most here. Look at verse 1. Chasing pleasure. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. Solomon frames this up as a test. This is not like a school test, an exam, like true and false, multiple choice. That's not what he's talking about. It's more of like an experiment. It's more like Solomon throws on his lab coat and he's like, hey, let's try some things out. Let's see what sticks here. And so Solomon tries everything from the buffet of the world. He tries laughter. Verse 2, I said of laughter, it is mad. And of pleasure, what use is it? Solomon tries laughter, and he says it's madness. I recently went and saw Nate Bargatze, a comedian in Anaheim, and it was an amazing experience. It was really funny, but the setup is interesting, right? So you go to this arena, I think it was the Honda Center, and there's like 10,000 people there, and they're all just looking at one guy, right? He's like walking around in circles, trying to talk to people behind him. He's got this whole like thing that he has to like talk to and entertain all these people in this room. And Solomon, remember, he has means unlike us. And so Solomon's next level. He doesn't have to go to an arena to see a comedian. He has the guy come to his house, right? He doesn't have to make sure that he's logged into Netflix or make sure that he has a babysitter on a certain night to go out. He says, Nate, come on over. You're coming over. Tell me some jokes, right? This is Solomon. This is next level. And he says, look, I had the best seat in the house, and look, it didn't measure up. It wasn't enough. And you guys know this too. After a while, laughter even gets old. I love to laugh. One day, I hope if we come close, like I want to laugh hard with you. That's one of the things that I love to do with friends. And listen, God and Solomon are not anti-laughter. In fact, Proverbs says laughter is medicine for the soul. But when all we chase is the next funny moment, when all we chase is the next comedic moment, it's not enough. Like we can pass around YouTube videos and Instagram memes with friends. That's fun, but it's like eventually you got to move on with your life, right? And go to work. Eventually, you go and do other things. Like, I don't think about anybody, I think it was in 2010, when Adam Sandler came out with Grown Ups, right, who walked out of the theater just like solemn and thinking about life, right? They're like, oh, that was really deep, right? No, it's a temporary moment of levity, and it doesn't last. Drinking. Laughter moves into drinking. Well, what about drinking? Joy at the bottom of the bottle. Here we go, verse 3. I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. What to make of this? Joy at the bottom of the bottle. Is Solomon a guy who's like has this curated wine collection, or is he a guy who would go crazy on a trip to Las Vegas, right? Like, what kind of guy was he like? And I bet it was probably both. On this quest for happiness, he's probably doing both. He's got the wine cellar, he's hosting the wine and cheese nights for his bougie friends, but he also goes to Vegas and lives it up. He's probably tried it all. And what he says here is that nothing actually satisfies. Nothing is actually ever enough. There's no real meaning in drink. Look, verse 4. It says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. This one is about his better homes and gardens, right? Like I made myself gardens and parks and planted them in all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. This is crazy. Like he's serious about some home renovations. Some of you during COVID, including our family, you guys did home renovations. You guys were home so much. You're like, all right, let's throw some of this, stimulus money in our backyard, and that's what we did, right? Like, so you guys remember those days when you got just free money from the government? It was amazing. And so we were like, let's, put a fire pit in our backyard. Let's make our backyard a place to hang out a little bit. Some of you guys went crazy. You added stuff to your kitchen, or maybe added a bedroom or something like that. Solomon takes it up a whole level. Solomon builds houses, like plural, for himself. He plants vineyards, he doesn't just buy a bottle of wine. He plants whole vineyards for his household. He creates parks and gardens. Some commentaries say that he was, in a way, trying to almost create his own Garden of Eden, this perfect place for him to reside and be happy. Now, maybe that sounds ideal to you. Like if you had unlimited money to build whatever you wanted to on your property. And I think this is actually quite appropriate to bring up for us as Californians, because I think much has been made about this California exodus the last few years. And I think probably at least half of us have had the thought, right, about like what would it be like to move to Montana, right, to buy a ranch or whatever. By the way, Montana is super expensive now, so that's off the table. But like we talk about this, right? Like 20 acres, have my dogs roam free, and the kids are out there with chickens, and it's like, I don't think we all always think through all the details of that. It's right. Like I don't want my kids near chickens all the time, but there's this sense of like, man, this speaks to me in some way. Like, what if we could build ourselves a park and have all this property? Well, guys, praise God, Solomon saved us the effort. There's no lasting joy even in where we live and what we build and the parks and all the things that we add to our lives. It's not lasting joy. Well, maybe it's money, servants, and property. Look at verse 7. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions, herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. It's written pretty clearly. I won't add too much here, but basically Solomon had the best of everything. He had the best house on the block. He had the most amount of money in his account. He had everything he could ever want. Like if he wanted to have, go see a concert, he didn't have to go to a Post Malone concert, and he just had Post Malone come to his house, right? It was crazy. The way that any fantasy, anything he wanted, any night of the week, it was at his fingertips. Now, again, I want to remind you, don't be distracted by Solomon's extreme wealth. And don't say, well, that's him, that was his experience. We all chase the same things. We all have different means to accomplish that. But we are all chasing the same things. Parents in this room, you have kids sitting near you. Your kids are chasing these same things. They wouldn't put those particular labels on them yet. But they're chasing satisfaction. They're chasing a hope to be fulfilled. It's like, hey, I want to go on Amazon and just look. How many times have my kids said that to me, right? I just want to look, Dad. And it's just feeding this insatiable desire to want to be satisfied by something. We all want stuff. We all want things. And what's worse is that we all have peers, friends, neighbors, coworkers who all talk about their stuff in a way that would make us think that if we actually had it, we'd be happy. And it's not true. It's garbage. It's not true. How many people that moved to Texas came back, right? How many people who bought the boat are like, why did I buy this boat? Where do I put this boat, right? Like, there's all kinds of regret around these things. And every person in this room, again, people will talk about these things like they're ultimate, and they're not. And so unless we are fully satisfied in Jesus first, if we put creation above the Creator, we won't be happy. The last thing we see is Solomon then moves into chasing a full life. In my Bible, in the ESV, it says the vanity of living wisely. I like that Solomon, he's nuanced here. Scripture is nuanced. It's not just black and white like, oh, it's like don't do bad stuff, do good stuff. Solomon actually in verse 12 of chapter 2, he says, so I turned to consider wisdom. Again, he's like going back to the best thing that he can think of. How do I approach my stuff with wisdom? So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in the dark, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived, listen to this, I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Solomon goes dark here. He uses his death as like the ultimate Uno reverse card. All right? It's like, hey, you live your life with wisdom, that's good. Good for you. You live your life with folly, that's not going to work out very well. But at the end of the day, the same event happens to you. Now, before you're like, what is this event? Like, should I buy a new dress? Like, No, it's not that kind of event. It's death. He's talking about death. I think about when I was a kid, there was this company called No Fear. Maybe you guys had the shirts as well. And there was a shirt that said, he who dies with the most toys still dies. right? Death comes for us all. And this is what Solomon reminds us in verse 12. All these things devoid of God, especially for the atheist, no hope in Jesus Christ, no hope in heaven. Man, death is the end. And so this event, this idea of like death being this equalizer, man, even in 2024, we still die, right? Like with all the tech that's available to us, with all the breakthroughs they're making in medicine, right? And I think I see it kind of anecdotally, kind of subjectively. Like I feel like generations are living longer, and that's cool. Like my parents are getting older, and they're still doing pretty well, right? Like that's awesome. That's great that there's a quality of life element. You know that like 35, 40 minutes away from here, in Loma Linda, that area is considered a blue zone. Maybe you guys have seen that documentary before. It's this area where scientists are not exactly sure why. There's some reasons in terms of like some correlations, but people in Loma Linda live like 7 to 8 years longer than the majority of the people around them. So that's neat. But guess what? They still die, right? Like eventually we all still die. And so we can kind of dance around the topic. We can talk about how it's great that people are living to 100. But at the end of the day, there's still the same event that happens to all of us. Verse 15. Where is verse 15? There it is. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool also happens to me. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart, this is also vanity. For the wise, as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. Man, this guy is just so optimistic, right? So I hated life. Because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after the wind. If any of you are looking for like a new like life verse, right? Ecclesiastes 2, verse 17. But here, honestly, can you relate at times? Are there days where you just like step back and you're like, what is this? Is this worthwhile? Is anything positive actually happening here? Is this worth my time? Like, why am I put here on this earth? Ecclesiastes, as I mentioned last week, it doesn't pull any punches. He says, I hate this life. Honesty is not our cultural norm, but I want you to know, if you zoom out a bit, you'll see that I hate this life, while it's a harsh phrase and maybe one that you would discourage your kids from even saying, it's an honest reflection of biblical lament. This is the way that we are to approach things honestly. And if you read through the Psalms, of lament, you see over and over again godly men and women who put their feelings out there and say, this is how I honestly feel about the life that we're living. This is how I honestly feel about the state of what we're experiencing. And it's a healthy practice for us to be honest in that way. I remember this song by Jack Johnson, and he has this quote from the news. It's a song he wrote. He said, 1 billion people died on the news tonight, but not so many cried at the terrible sight. Why don't the newscasters cry when they read about the people who die? At least they could be decent enough to just put a tear in their eye. Because we don't like to think about death. It's not something that's comfortable. It's not something that's, if we're honest, we want to spend much time and energy on. But Solomon is real, and he says, look, it's a grievous thing. It's a grievous, hard thing to live this life and to realize at the end of the day, nothing much changes. And that's why as believers, as Christians, we have this hope that we realize one day we long for Jesus Christ to wipe every tear from our eye. That's our ultimate hope. But until then, many of us have had that thought. It reiterates then work and toil. Look at verse 18. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. He talks about succession here. And who knows whether he will be a wise or a fool, yet he will be the master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. And so I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This is so relatable, right? Have you ever felt like you worked really hard and you had to walk away and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen to that project I worked on? This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. Last week we talked about this as a major theme, that the idea of work and toil, the vocation and the time we spend at work, what does it really amount to? And so he goes back to this thought. And he says, look, it's disappointing because at the end of the day, people aren't even going to take care of your stuff. You worked so hard for it, right? And he talks about succession. And it's kind of oddly specific. Some scholars think that Solomon is actually thinking about his life in real time. If you don't know much about Israel's history, Solomon, the son of David, he was given the kingdom of Israel intact. And yet his son, Rehoboam, he was the last guy in that line who had Israel intact. After that, it split into two kingdoms. And so it's possible, it doesn't say it here, but it's possible that Solomon's like, my son is messing this up, right? Like, I gave him something intact, and we'll never have this united kingdom in Israel ever again. And maybe you can experience that, and maybe you have experienced that in the past. If you look at verse 23, for all his days are full of sorrow, his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. I think what he's doing here is he's talking to the common thread that we've experienced of workaholism, right? Many of you guys are workaholics. Many of you work too much, and you think that if you work hard enough, you'll find satisfaction in that work. Well, look at Scripture. What does it say? It says that it's a vexation. All you're doing is you're losing sleep over this work. It doesn't make you any happier, right? And so we want to exercise wisdom here. He's not saying don't work. He's saying work is important, but when you work, realize that you're not going to find your ultimate joy and hope in the work that you do. There's no contentment, and ultimately you die at the end. Let's wrap this up. Because in verse 24 to 26, we see a little bit of light in the tunnel. And I'm glad you stuck around for the end, because this verse 24, it's considered an enjoyment text from commentators in Ecclesiastes. Verse 24, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. He says, look, there's a better way to live. There's a better way. It's through the lens of God. If we view this list, this whole thing that we've read this morning through the lens of God, it's this idea of like, man, you've been striving for something over and over and over again. Well, for once, what if you receive something instead? You realize that's the key to a balanced and healthy outlook on life. It's not about us striving and working for something. It's about us receiving something. And what do we receive? We recognize everything we have, every experience we have as gifts from the hand of God. He opens his hand and satisfies us with real joy. We can find joy, we can find satisfaction in God alone. And so anytime we reject God as the giver of gifts, anytime we try and work it out on our own, every time that we rebel against what is proper and right when it comes to these things, every time we put something else at the center, that is vanity. That disappoints. Verse 25. For apart from him, apart from God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This is also vanity and a striving after the wind. It's strange that he kind of goes back and says, look, toil can bring joy. But let me remind you, back in the Garden of Eden, we were created for work. We were created to collaborate with God because we are created in God's image. And work done in the right way, we are set free to enjoy that work. The Bible actually gives us permission to enjoy it. And so listen, whatever job you have, whatever you have to do and accomplish tomorrow. Whatever, maybe your homemaking or your widget making, whatever you do, everything, it can be delight to God. Whatever we eat, whatever relationship we experience, every good and perfect gift comes from God. And on their own, they don't live up. On their own, in a vacuum, they're not enough. They serve as terrible gods. But again, are you striving for something or are you receiving something? I believe our posture to receive is foundational to the Christian life. Listen to me. Our posture to be ones who receive is foundational to the Christian life. We don't work for, we don't accomplish. We receive from a God who is good. We receive from a God who accomplishes everything, even in our salvation. Grace is not earned. Salvation cannot be bought. It doesn't matter how hard we try. It's not enough. We receive them. We can surrender in the same way we receive his gifts. We receive God's work for us through his son on the cross and be changed forever. So let's bow our heads this morning as we wrap up. I know we've gone a little late. Kids, thanks for hanging with us this morning and getting through the service. But as we all consider this insatiable cycle of trying to accomplish and trying to fill our hearts with what satisfies, as we understand and read Ecclesiastes, I hope that you remember this message this week, that we are satisfied in nothing but the work of Jesus. We're not satisfied until we see God as the giver of all good gifts. Lord, we ask that this would be true of our perspective as Christians, that as believers, we would fight those messages of the world, that we would fight those lies, that other things can satisfy. God, would we not be those who have to reinvent the wheel, but would we just simply follow after the wisdom and the quest, this journey that Solomon went on, and understand, man, there's so much wisdom and understanding here. And we don't have to experience the heartbreak of disappointment. God, I pray for those who have their priorities mixed up this morning, who've been chasing the wrong things. And Lord, would you enter this place? Would you have your way in our hearts? Would you reorient our priorities this morning as we look for you and every gift that we have? We love you and praise in your name. Amen.